On this week's video version of our podcast, Trail Cam Radio, we have Garrett and Grant Putnam from Last Breath here on the podcast, and we caught wind of a new series called The Image Autopsy. And what that is a series where they dive into trail camera data and how they used it to tag a mature buck. In this episode, we talk about some of those stories and also some other hunting strategy for this season on how to kind of get more out of your trail cameras in order to tag a target buck. So I hope you guys enjoy. If you do, leave a like and also comment. Now let's get into the episode.
Lights,
camera,
follow the trail.
ready to shoot.
If you know where a deer's bedding and you know where he's eating, that deer should be dead.
Camera.
If you're passive on a deer, what you're doing is you're teaching them.
I've got 30 bucks in the Michigan record book. Everyone but one has had at least one previous wound on his body. Some had as many as 4.
Trail Cam Radio
From the guys at Exodus.
All right, we're live with a fresh episode of Trail Cam Radio.
Yeah.
So it's Sunday morning. Thanks for having me here in your guys' studio. It's really nice to show up to someone else's podcast studio and just literally record. It's very nice to not have to do any of the front end work in that sense. But we have Grant and Garrett here. Grant, this is the first Trail Camera Radio guest here, but Whitetail Cribs veteran. And then we have Garrett. He's been on the podcast here a few times and also Whitetail Cribs guest. So thanks for recording here Sunday morning.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks for having us.
So it's deer season starts this upcoming week. How do things look?
I'll be honest. You know, we've had years where we're less prepared as far as our farms, mentally, archery, but this year we're as ready as we can ever be. Our farms and leases are groomed to a T. The traps are set, but unfortunately, this is one of the first years we probably don't have something completely dialed in, and like a buck dialed in. Yet literally yesterday was the last card pull before season, and we're still just trying to figure them out. We don't have one of those 5 or 6 year old deer pinned down yet.
I think that the important distinction is, too, that we're hunting 2 private farms, between you and I. And there are a couple deer on one of the farms that we've historically killed a lot of big deer on that got hit by EHD last year. Mm-hmm. So our good crop of 3-year-olds, we had 3 3-year-olds last year that lived. They're 4 this year, and 2 of them are nice. Like, they're going to be very, very good deer next year at 5. So we're not going to hunt them, even though they've been showing up with regularity.
Right.
And I think if we wanted to, we could go slide an arrow through one of them in particular in this next cold front that we're going to have moving in here in the opening weekend of Illinois, or at least have an opportunity to put ourselves in position to do that. But on our other farm, the one with 4, 5, 6-year-old deer that we call it the heartbeat farm. I don't know if you and any of your listeners feel about this, but we can manage the first farm I talked about like to a T. So we have our edges feathered around our food plots. We have 12 acres of food on it: green, corn, soybeans, clover, micro plots, turnips. We have stand locations for every wind, multiple mobile blinds, multiple elevated insulated blinds that we've built by hand. And so that farm is the one that got whacked with EHD. So the other farm, we call it the heartbeat farm because any deer that gets us jacked, we're gonna pull the trigger on. So any deer that comes down the pipe and makes the heart start working, we're gonna shoot them. So
the difference is really the primary farm, our bread and butter farm. We do have that ability to within reason, as long as we don't devalue the property. The owners are extremely allowing for us to do things to better wildlife habitat, etc. The other farm is a lot larger, and it's a new farm. We started leasing it last year, but there's 2 big things. First off, we really have little to no ability to groom or manicure it, and secondly, there is a lot of pressure around it, which everybody has neighbors, but it just seemed like last year when we hunted there was an extreme difference between our one farm and this farm with just hunting pressure. So with that, I don't want to say our standards drop, but realistically, we just don't plan or anticipate to have that progression of history with deer there due to the higher likelihood of them getting harvested, right? So at our primary farm, unfortunately, it was devastated. I mean, literally devastated. We had a beautiful age structure, and we were just chugging along there, and then to have it completely get wiped out. In that mile, just to give your listeners reference, there was over 100 deer found dead. Whoa. And of that, confirmed, the 2 5-year-olds and the 6-year-olds the neighbors found that we were planning on hunting. We found
sucks.
2 bucks on our property dead.
And it's not like we were aware of the deer like our big hit lister, we call him Pretty Boy. And it wasn't like a deer that we just had a trail camera picture of. No. Like, we let him go at 3 at 20 yards below us making a scrape. We let him go at 4 when we rattled him in twice. We let him go at 5 when he videotaped him on the night that he killed a different buck with a gun, and he was at like 80 yards, which is a chip shot with any modern shotgun by most people's standards, and he would have been.
He was gorgeous. We got him
huge.
In velvet. I mean, he was going to be beautiful, but enough of that sob story, right? I mean, EHD sucks. I hope it never happens to anybody.
Yeah.
Did
that force you guys to diversify your farms a little bit, to go out and strike, all right, we need to find somewhere else or a plan B here because we don't have anything to hunt on that?
We were proactively looking before that because we had lost a farm that same year, and it coincidentally happened that we actually picked up a couple different farms, but this other place that we talked about, like I said, it's bigger. It has a lot more biodiversity as far as like topography changes, fauna changes. It's got a little bit of everything, and when you walk out there, you're like, "Holy crap! This is going to be loaded with deer." And coincidentally, it's like the opposite of it. Even though it's big and it's got warm grasses, there's hay, there's both types of monocrop corn and beans that are rotated every year. There's big whitetail or white oak ridges and hardwood valleys. You just like, man, where do I start? And then Grant and I started hunting out there, and we'd like hunt and see like 2 deer. And like, so we're like,
the deer density is
we're in the wrong spot. So we went and we hung a huge observation stand that we could see like forever, like the highest point, and we saw like 4 deer in the pit cornfield, and we're like, what is going on? Where are they at? And again, it just it's incredible, the shift of about 30 miles, how much different pressure and hunting methods there are. There's nothing wrong with it. I shouldn't say there's nothing wrong with it, but everybody has their ability to do it. But there's a lot of pressure around us that where people drive deer, and I mean it's fine. It's a proven method. It works, but and it's very effective at killing numbers of deer, and that's what they do. I mean, we were sitting there opening morning last year during gun season, and I mean there wasn't 10 minutes without us hearing a shot. I mean,
I think we heard 82 shots from when we got into our blind at like 4:30 a.m. The sun rose. 82 shots between then and 11 o'clock when we relocated.
Yeah.
11 a.m.
It was just demoralizing.
No, it's just like,
So Logan and Jeff hunted out there because it's a new farm. We're like, hey, we can't cover all this. You guys sit over there and just see what you can see. And they're texting me like, are you hearing all this? Or like, yeah, we are. And it's just finally like lunch came around, instead of like sitting through, we hadn't seen a deer, and we were just like, well, we're gonna get out of here, man, because you just bang, 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 and
So you think they were driving literally opening morning?
Oh, guarantee. We heard them yelling and screaming. Oh yeah, yeah.
So this is so with that being said, what did you guys learn on that farm?
We killed deer on that farm. We did. Nice ones.
Before gun season, and then like, is it just a ghost town after gun season, or do they move on to your farm afterward?
No, and I don't know. We don't know the pressure that was there before us. We do know that there was a large crew of people that hunted it, and they had some mishaps which allowed us to get in there. So I think that there was heavy pressure on us too, But it'll be interesting this year because really we took 3 deer off that piece last year, 2 bucks and a doe, and it'll be really interesting to see if we have more resident deer move in now because there's less pressure, or what happens. But I mean, literally, we left at 11 o'clock that day, and they're like, we're leaving, and there's a guy sitting
on our fence post.
on our fence post, like waiting as they're driving towards us. I'm like, oh my goodness. And he was on his property. He wasn't doing anything wrong, but it's just, just the way it is.
You got to believe that if there was a deer in our field, though, behind him, he would have did the old stand-up turn and shoot.
You hope he didn't.
I hope he didn't.
Yeah, hard to say. So part of this, the goal of this conversation, you guys have 6 seasons of content out in the world, which basically means you guys have been hunting and filming your hunts for a while. It's been a minute. It's been a few years. How many years total?
Well, our 6 seasons are produced. I mean,
7 years.
We've been filming since I was 15, so that would have been 12 years ago.
Okay, a little over a decade. And with that being said, is you guys have consistently killed bucks over that time and getting them on film as well. So obviously, above average success, there has to be some rhyme or reason for that consistency and level of killing those deer. So what I wanted to dive into, especially with deer season here, what are some of the tactics you guys are doing? What are you looking into those pictures? How are you setting them? So this is going to be a mini masterclass for trail cameras in season use. So obviously a brand new farm. I'm sure you guys had to make some adjustments, move cameras, and go into that. So with that being said, you guys have also released a series on YouTube, which is really interesting. Obviously, here at Exodus, we respect and understand the hard work that goes into producing something like that. And that is called the Image Autopsy, and you guys break down some of those hunts. So first things first, let's talk about that and kind of maybe one or two really stand out case studies per se, because that's kind of what they are. They're little mini case studies.
Yeah.
This is what we use. This is how we did, how we got on this deer and how we killed them. So is there one you guys want to dive into?
You can do
I
one.
could dive into almost all of them. I think all the stories are really interesting. So I think we've killed on video over the course of, since we've been filming, I think we've killed 38 bucks on video. And we did the case studies of the 13 best deer that we had the most history with. So there's some deer that we've killed that are not pictured and not mentioned in the series just because the history was short, but things that we really learned from were the ones that we went and produced. And so there's 5 auxiliary episodes, but the one that stands out to me, and this is for your listeners that are trail camera users, 9 guys out of 10 are not hunting huge, extravagant, large farms in Illinois. But my favorite lesson that Garrett and I have learned in terms of the image autopsy in the series and all the trail camera data we've collected since we started using trail cameras when you started hunting, like when you were 15. So you bought the first original like Moultrie that looked like a half turtle shell. You know what I'm saying? Like when it came out in like 06. And so what I've learned, episode 1, which is about Geronimo, one of our biggest deer that we've ever killed together. We hunt a 100-acre farm. That's the farm. That's the bread and butter farm we mentioned earlier. And that deer, we did not have a single picture of him on the south 60 acres. It's a big rectangle. He was only on the north side. So that just proves to you, 100 acres, that's I don't know, I would say it's
pretty
on
good
the
size farm.
larger side of a place that somebody could hunt, but it's not the biggest by a long stretch of the word. So for those of you guys that are hunting 40s, 50s, 60-acre little chunks that are privately owned, that proves to you that you could have a big deer whose core home range is living on you, and then you never get pictures of. In that south 60 acres, not one single picture in 4 years of hunting that deer, which is absolutely mind-blowing, given the food plots that we have down there and given the way that our farm lays out.
Do you guys get a lot of mature bucks on the south part of that farm?
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's interesting to find out, and diving into that episode a little more, I think it's important to recognize 2 things. A, how a deer's core area can be very concentrated. That was one of the takeaways from that episode. Is like, okay, understanding Geronimo prefers this area, he lives in it, and he doesn't really vacate it. And then secondly, once you understand that, realizing that you have to limit your pressure there. So you know that he's staying in a small area or only on a portion of your farm. Well, when you go to hunt it there, you better have everything lined up and ready, and you're going in to kill him, not just to hunt. But like you said, Jake, the south half of our farm will have a shooter or 2 that are resident deer to that half as well. So it's not just that one half is really good and one half is bad. It's not that at all. It's very similar in makeup. It's spread throughout. It just was interesting to note there was almost like a lateral line that deer just didn't want to cross. I mean, we had all of our trail systems were monitored, all of our food plots were monitored, and he did not go south.
No, and I think that kind of dives into the dominant buck theory, and what I mean by that is I totally believe in the theory that if you have a dominant buck in a core range and you remove him from that core range, then another dominant buck will resume that core range, because we've seen it time and time and time again, and we have 2 paths on our farm. And if anything, what we learned about the Geronimo case study and hunting him was that territorial scrapes, like deer don't like to leave their core area if they're a dominant buck, unless it's obviously during the rut. But they will carve out an area, and another dominant buck will rarely come inside, at least what we've found, and they'll honor that scrape line, because that Geronimo home range kind of runs east to west, and it's an 80-acre, 90-acre swath. It's like horizontal east-west, a rectangle that scoops the north half of our farm. And then on the south half of our farm, there's a bedding area that we call the Lucky Bedding Run, and that will usually hold a dominant buck as well. So typically on any given year on this 100 acres, we will have 2 dominant bucks resuming those areas on our 100 acres, and they will not cross into the other one's territory unless it's, an extenuating circumstance, or it's like the rut.
The seeking and chasing phase, yeah.
Seeking and chasing phase.
So
it's pretty cool.
When that farm got wiped out with those dominant core areas, did this 3-year-olds take claim to that?
Yep. It's pretty interesting to figure out, and it's made us better hunters too with this farm that we've been able to do so much to and learn on, because you kind of see, like Geronimo, we talk about Geronimos because it was like the aha year for like the north half, and it does go over into the neighbors on both sides of ours, so it's not like he's just on us, but it's different. Like where he lives and the deer that choose that is different from the southern side, because that north side definitely has more grass. The topography is a little more hilly up there, but on the south side, it's more of hedge, honeysuckle, a lot of denser timber and more flat. But starkly, like different deer will take it. So this year we have TJ, and then we have Hope from last year. And those are our 4-year-olds this year, and they've filled in those 2 niches, and they're literally working just like those other deer have. We have TJ that's on the north half. We have yet to have him on the southern half of our farm with cameras. And then same thing with Hope. Hope is a resident deer of the south half of the farm, and not of the north half.
That's straight.
Now, we do suspect, like given the way that we've changed our food plots up, like we do have a destination flood, a very large one, and we're hoping to pull them both there, because deer will get really tolerant, especially big deer, really tolerant of each other when the timing is right. The rut is over and they're just back to food. They'll get very tolerant.
Late winter, yeah.
Yes.
How big is that destination food plot so people get an understanding?
5 acres.
And what does it make up? What is it, soybeans?
Nope. So we actually have an agreement with the farmer that alternates every year from corn to beans. So this year it is corn. Corn doesn't have as much protein in it, but as far as tonnage goes, good yield on soybean is about 60 acres or 60 bushels an acre. Corn is about 200. So there are tons, literally tons of food there. We also have a lot of biodiversity out there as far as our food plots go. We have 2 acres of beans that are double planted. We electrical fence them so they didn't get chomped. We've got about 2 acres of Whitetail Institute Imperial Clover, then about another 2 acres of beets and greens, which is a large brassica and bulb mix. So we have good diversity, but really the thing that's going to weather the winter is just that 5-acre monocrop, great big pile of food for them to be able to eat on.
How long have you guys been hunting this farm?
This will be our 7th year hunting there.
And so from year 1 and 2 to today, how much better is that farm in terms of, what has been the reward of all this work in terms of when you first stepped on it and to today?
So when we first stepped on it, that year we bucked out. We killed 4 deer over 140, and it was I would call it our best hunting season ever.
Okay.
Garrett killed a 157 that year and a 161.8.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty freaking large 8-pointer. And then I killed a 10-pointer with split brows that went like mid-150s. And then this deer actually right here behind us, which I think he would... I don't think he goes 140, but I think if his brows were there, he'd be right out there. So anyway, an incredible year. What we noticed that year was just the volume of bucks, like the hunting that went on there before us. It was kind of, I don't want this to sound bad, but the person that hunted it before us was the typical, like, I'm going to go smoke in my tree stand. I'm going to chew in my tree stand. I'm going to drink beer. So I think that when Garrett and I got there, they did not know what hit them. And we were able to do really, really good things that first year. So after we took that that crop of big deer off of there. Then every year we got into this routine like we've talked about, where we find that we have one or two, usually two dominant bucks that rotate through that area. But in terms of killing deer by design, I would call it, we've gotten substantially better at understanding these movements of these deer that are living on our farm, and we've manipulated the farm to force that movement even more. For example, our trail cameras, if there's a deer that wants to access our late season food source, they must walk by one of 3 trail cameras. They cannot access that food any other way, because we went down and we sawed, I don't even know, probably 80 to 120 trees down and felled the edge and feathered the food plot. So our cameras are extremely efficient, I would call it. So that's been a big uptake. Our first year hunting there, we didn't find any sheds on the property, other than maybe one side of like a 3-year-old 8-pointer. But now we are starting to find deer antlers on our property, which has been great.
Really rewarding too, especially when you want to create this history with these deer. But I think the biggest thing to note is it takes time to really become proficient at hunting a farm. And it does change year after year. There is a lot of consistency to it. But even this new place, right, we are adapting and learning. We're changing. We hung stands in areas we didn't even think about hunting last year, literally. So to answer your question, I think the hunting, even though EHD has put a little bit of a hitch in our get up for the last, probably this year and maybe next year, the way we hunted has definitely gotten better, smarter and evolved. And if we go in there now, we're hunting a deer, we're hunting a target deer. We're not just going to sit and enjoy hunting. Don't get me wrong. That is the essence of whitetail hunting, is we're doing it for enjoyment. But I feel like now with that farm, when we hunt, it's definitely with purpose. And it's because we've learned it and we've been able to groom it that way.
And then, barring our EHD catastrophe last year, I think that our deer density of the deer that are living on our farm, with all the timber improvements that we've made and all of the food plots, architecture and layouts and clearing and everything like that. So we have an aspiration to next year do 5 acres of big blue stem like warm season switchgrass, and we're going to go and buy about 200 little foot tall pine trees, cedars hopefully, if we can find them at the right price, and just start stabbing them into the ground, and know that if 20 or 30 of those make it out of 200, that in about 8 to 12 years when we're hunting out there still, hopefully we can hunt out there still, that we'll have a bedding sanctuary that's like no other. That's the one key on that property that we're missing. We do not have a ton of bedding cover late season, so we're trying to improve that right now.
One tip for buying those, the state has really cheap trees, so they have a big sale every year. I don't know if you guys are aware. You can buy those extremely cost effective, so anyone listening out there too that wants to plant 100 white oaks, if you go to the store, it's going to be pretty pricey.
Oh, yeah.
But look at your state or different co-ops, too.
Okay, good to know.
So I guess with that, is that where you guys do most of your hunting over the last 5 years? So we could dive into this farm and how you're using cameras. I think it's really interesting how you guys have feathered your edge to basically constrict traffic to those destination food sources. But I guess, what are some...
Well, I was going to say that was a very long-winded answer to the first.
Yeah, sorry.
We're going to keep going. Autopsy.
Some podcast veterans here.
Sorry about that. I have another episode that really sticks out, and there's 2. I'm going to do one really quick here, and that is the image autopsy that we did for Phantom. So this is a very prolific deer that we've killed as a company and a team. Matt harvested him, and he was hunting a pretty small piece. Literally is
30 acres.
Yeah, it's standard size. And this deer is incredibly impressive. It has like an 8-inch drop tine, really thick drop tine. But they didn't have like that tried and true. This guy was our paparazzi celebrity. We had hundreds of pictures of him. No, it was actually quite the inverse. They would get a sequence of videos and pictures of him, and then he would vanish. So Matt, analyzing the data, figured out that it was every single 9 days, that he would show up back to the farm. And and then he would vanish again. And finally, on his fourth rotation, third or fourth, I'm not sure, or fourth, right?
Fourth rotation.
Matt had put it all together, and it just happened to land on opening day of gun season. And he's like, we have better farms to hunt, but if there's ever a chance to kill this deer, we have to be here now. And he went there, and it was a terrible, terrible day. I mean, it's super, super windy. If you guys hunt in Illinois, you'll remember it a couple years ago. It was gale-force winds. Matt and Jesse were like, we can't sit in a tree. It's too windy. We're sitting on the ground. And sure as shit, Phantom came cruising through there, 9-day cycle, and he killed him. So on that note, it's interesting from a camera standpoint that sometimes there is hidden data that you may even overlook. Because usually when we look at a camera, a picture of a buck, we're going, okay, date, time, temperature. Grant's got a wind chart. We're
Which
thinking,
way is he facing when he enters the camera?
We're doing like a lot of normal processing, but Matt started looking at it and he started like, okay, like
It
every
was the
single
18th,
night.
then the 27th, then the 6th, and they killed him on the 15th that year, which was opening day of gun season. Every 9 days, like clockwork, on the fourth 9-day cycle, killed him.
That's incredible. Which, if you took 100 people, how many people are going to put that together? Maybe
I know.
just Matt, or just one. I don't
That's
know.
a deer hunting savant, man.
Yeah.
We talked about that earlier. He's like the Rain Man of killing deer.
That is a Rain Man type.
I know,
Seriously.
I know,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that was a
I'm not
takeaway
joking.
image from Image Autopsy for us is like they guaranteed there's something in here, and you may pick up on it or not. But the one that stands out to me, the absolute favorite episode, was the episode of Lucky. Lucky is one of my favorite hunts. Personally, I didn't kill him per se. I hunted with him, but this was a deer, and we love hunting over mock scrapes. It's one of our best tactics, especially for killing deer in October. But Lucky was a 5.5-year-old deer. We had passed him when he was 4. Knew where he was living on our farm. We used a mock scrape, and ever since we had started it till the day that we had killed him, we had him on camera 17 days in a row. Now, most people would be like, wow, you should have killed him like a week earlier. But the problem was it was warm, and every single time we got, not pictures, I should say videos of him, it was at night. And it was at the middle of the night, really. So it wasn't like he was getting close to sunrise or sunset. But the key takeaway from this is understanding that we have this deer hooked. You know, he is on a milk run to this scrape, and he's going to check it. We just have to wait for the conditions are right to make him move during daylight. And so having that data, especially the wireless data, that we every single night, here he'd come and he'd beat up the scrape, and he was a big bully buck. He'd posture up to any other deer that was in the camera. He'd bristle, he'd push his ears back. If there was even a little buck that would come up and approach the scrape while he was in it. So we knew his demeanor, we knew his body language, and boom, that big first huge cold front hit in like that mid-ish
October
late
21st.
You know, not really late October that people think about, but it was like that little October. We went in and we killed him. And
Rattled him in.
Yep.
That's insane. That's from what I've seen with the cameras I've run. I totally agree with scrapes being great for mature bucks. In
Yes.
that, even really 17. This all falls when some of that weather starts to break. But talk about that scrape that he hit 17 days in a row. I mean, what was it next to? Was it? Explain the whole area, or where was he coming from? Just break down that scrape, because I think there might be a lot of value in that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Go for
so
it.
there's a 4-acre alfalfa field. So in this farm that we're talking about, there are 2 mirror image 4-acre fields. One is very secluded. That is our bread and butter food plot. Then we have a larger 22-acre ag field, which in one corner of it is the destination plot on the south side, like Garrett was just talking about, that's corn. Well, there's a third field that's alfalfa, and it borders the corner of a pretty highly traveled intersection. So it's very close to the road, which is not a place that you often find like a mature buck. There's a lot of traffic, a lot of people working, typically yelling, like semi used to humans, I would say. So this is alfalfa field, and we installed this video, or we actually filmed a how to make a mop scrape video.
Putting it in.
And it was in the corner of this alfalfa field. And we hypothesize based on our trail camera data and where he was coming to and approaching the scrape, that he lived to the east of this field. So like I said, a long skinny rectangle, 4 acres alfalfa. We put the scrape in, and it just grew in size. It grew, and pretty soon every deer over on that part of the farm, ages Lucky being the kingpin of that scrape, all the way down to like 2-year-old bucks were using it, hammering it all the time, and Lucky was just continuing to go over there. Field is about 80, 90 yards wide at that point, and has a little bend to it. So his bedding area was directly to the east of this scrape by what we believe to be about 100 yards. So we got in there very early the day that we killed him. And an important thing to note too was that we took our favorite branch, which we'll get into this next episode because we're going to record another episode on how to make a mock scrape. But we used a white oak branch, zip tied it to there in our tutorial, and Lucky just immediately started using it and taking that up. And the scrape grew to be huge. It almost looked like a community scrape, which we'll get into next episode, I would say, just because it was getting torn up so often. So typically on a west wind, this is kind of the more deep look at it. On a west wind, that would blow that scrape right to him. Mm-hmm. So we waited till we had a north wind come in, and we brought a decoy. And one of our favorite strategies with hunting with a decoy and rattling is to put the decoy in this is kind of odd, but our scent cone. So we really try to put ourselves in a position where our scent cone, when a deer enters the scent cone, we can kill him. So we put the decoy on the far side of our scent cone adjacent to the buck's bedding area, where we think the buck's bedding area is. So that way when he enters his side of the scent cone and postures up to the decoy, we can kill him, which is what we did with that deer and what we did actually last year with the buck we killed last year. So that's kind of how it lays out. And we got in there very early that day, set up, and just waited and were patient. But it was not very far from his bedroom because within 3 minutes of us rattling, he was in our face, ready to roll.
So you think he was bedded on the east side of that alpha field or clover, whatever, right on the edge.
Yep. And that's that south bedding area that we talked about. Like that area is where Lucky lived, and to the north of it was another deer we called Johnsonville, which we didn't catch up with that year. But I think a couple key things to note from that scrape is that we did put it on an inside corner. It seems to be really productive for us just because it concentrates traffic. Mm-hmm. And then Grant already highlighted this, but the conjunction to the bedding area was really important because it was right on the fringe of where we thought his cutoff line was. And he also had multiple challenge scrapes that he had installed. One was probably, it was right by our stand that we had moved, probably 30 yards away. And then he had one on the other side of the field. Now, those were his scrapes. He had made them, and we let him operate those. But this one was easy for us to be able to freshen and check and monitor. And it was really the one that was pissing him off the most because whatever scent we were putting in that, it wasn't going in his scrapes over there. But he's like, somebody is knocking on my door, and I just don't know who it is. So that's the fact that we were able to get him hooked, like I said, and get that consistency that of him coming and checking it every single night. Grant said we had other deer in there. Yes, we did. It's not like it was only Lucky's scrape, but Lucky was the only buck that was there every single night.
Mm-hmm. So the year prior, was he hanging out in the same exact area? Is this something that, the multiple years of history made it much more manageable?
Yes. So Lucky, he got the name Lucky because at that time we were managing the farm for 4-year-olds, not 5. And he would have been on the hit list, but his biggest tine, his G3, was broken off at the main beam. And we both had opportunities to kill him, Grant especially, multiple times. And it's just like I would be a little disappointed in harvesting a deer that has his strongest attribute busted off. So we took a gamble, we let him go, and he came back just like clockwork, resumed his bedding area that he did. And when we noticed that, we immediately went in and installed that scrape. And that's what kind of led to his demise in October.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. And that's the part of it where you kind of made mention of the other farm you guys picked up. And this, I jump around farm to farm every year. So I'm losing and gaining access every year. Oh, so I understand the farms I've hunted for a long time. I feel much better going in there.
Yeah.
But I guess those multiple years of history and also paying attention to those 2- and 3-year-olds. If you're happy to kill a 4-year-old, that 3-year-old, just cataloging all that data, because I think once you start paying attention at 2, 3, 4, 5, deer, we
start cataloging deer if they're a visible. So this is kind of weird. what I'm about to say, but we don't pay attention to a 2-year-old unless there's a very distinguishing characteristic about them, meaning most 2-year-olds, and at least in our opinion, are your standard basket rack 8 or your standard basket rack 10. And they're fairly hard to distinguish unless, like I said, there's something weird about them, like a 10-pointer that sits very high off his head, or a 10-pointer with a little inside point, or a cheater, or an 8-pointer with like a split brow. If you can identify that, then we catalog that deer. But if it's just like a standard run-of-the-mill, like smaller 2-year-old, we kind of let that slip. But a 3-year-old, we start really diving down and categorizing them, putting them into folders, and trying to figure out if there's a pattern, because we know in 2 years, deer are more or less creatures of habit, in our opinion, and then in a couple years that we could plan on using data that we collected from them as 3, when they're, at the bottom range of being a dominant buck, quote unquote, to harvest them at 4, 5, 6.
So we've been talking about this farm. So how many cameras are you guys running on that? Most years, what's the breakdown of cell cameras versus regular? So we'll start there and then go from a little bit deeper.
So this farm, 100 acres, we run anywhere from 6 to 10 cameras on it, depending on what sign or scrapes, not scrapes is part of the sign, but what we need. So at a minimum, I'd say we have 6. And then, I would say even sometimes 12, especially if we have a big deer, like one of these 5 or 6-year-old deer that we're trying to really finitely keen in on. Of that, I would say 2 or 3 of them are mobile, and the rest are standard cameras. Our mobile cameras, we try to put those in places that are very pressure sensitive. So, that northern bedding area that we talk about, or if it's kind of in the timber on one of our big pinch points or large trails that we've cut, we don't really want to get in there. We can't just jump off the side-by-side of the four-wheeler, grab a camera, and get back in. That's where we're kind of utilizing our cellular cameras most. Or if there's a very good or hot scrape, then we want to make sure and stay away and stay out of there until the timing is right. So that's where we utilize our cell cameras. But with us being able to groom this farm, like we've said, it's allowed us to hone in on the effectiveness of our trail cameras rather than putting them out, checking them 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks later to analyze that data. We've been able to really effectively deploy cameras, get what we need, and not have to keep bouncing them around. So on that, I'd say Heartbeat is 8 cameras. I was trying to add up how many we have out there now.
That's about 8.
8. Yes.
Roughly how large is that farm?
100 acres.
Okay. Heartbeat is 100 acres?
No.
No.
The bread and butter farm is, like you said, about 6 to 12, depending. Like this year, it's going to be lighter for us because we have those 2 4-year-olds, and we're hoping that they stay. They don't venture off and get themselves killed during the rut. But most of our trail cam resources, our modems, etc., will be at the Heartbeat farm, which the Heartbeat farm you picked up is about 380, 400. So it's larger, but there's only about 35, 40 acres of timber total on it. It's not a huge amount of timber. It's mostly ag.
And set aside.
Yeah, and set aside. There's a lot of bedding opportunity out there. There's 40 acres of, like we were talking about, that cedar ridge that's just covered in warm season grass that we picked up a couple sheds off of last year. But, yeah.
So that farm, like the Heartbeat farm, the bigger one, we've deployed a majority of the fleet out there for reasons like Grant had said. On our bread and butter farm, we just don't have the deer that we know of. There's always an opportunity for a random deer. We're not dismissing that. But the deer that we know of that are resident deer, they're ones we're trying to avoid us having
it's one of those, both of those deer are deer that would make it'd make a lot of people happy to kill them.
Yeah.
But we just know that the potential is there. The jump from 4 to 5 that we've seen as we've tried to push our envelope to shooting 5-year-olds out there is always pretty impressive.
Yeah, we've consistently seen 25 to 35-inch jumps from 4 to 5. And for us, given that, farm, whatever. But the Heartbeat farm, we have 3 mobiles out there as well, and then right now we have 8 regular cameras.
So where are those mobile cameras right now?
Right now, all 3 of them are over scrapes.
Yep.
Every single one. At this time of the year, they're over scrapes because we're trying to get a deer. And mind you, we're humble enough to admit we're still learning this farm. We don't have it figured out. So we are trying to get a big deer that we want to hunt, which we know there are 2 5-year-olds out there, One of them Grant passed with the shotgun last year as a 4-year-old. We know there are 2 very nice deer out there. We have pictures of them in velvet. We have pictures of them hard-horned, but we don't have them like pissed off. We're not in their bedroom yet, so we're still trying to figure that out. We changed 2 cameras out yesterday, 2 mobiles. Yep. Moved them over. One was an existing scrape, and we made a mock scrape on a ridge where we believe there is a deer, like a buck, bedding in there. Scrapes, beds. We knew it, so we put a mock scrape right there, hopefully to trigger him. And then the other one is in a little kill plot that we have, which historically last year we had a lot of very good mature deer movement through there, and we already have a good deer working a scrape in it. So the other ones are deployed on edges where we can check them again with the side-by-side. Relatively easy to collect that data, get in, get out, low scent, and kind of intrusion. And, we'll see. We just don't quite have that one right under our thumb yet.
Get it. I understand that. So you guys pretty much do the majority of your hunting on these 2 farms. So I guess looking at 2020.
Yep. We'll spend
100%.
the majority of the time on the Heartbeat farm. Yeah, because we do not anticipate there to be a deer that we want to kill at the other farm, our bread and butter farm. So we'll spend the majority of our time and resources, days off, trail cameras, everything like that on the Heartbeat farm, trying to lock down a deer. So like Garrett said, we're constantly moving cameras, and we're constantly hanging and rehanging stands for particular winds. For example, yesterday we went out and we hung up 2 stands in anticipation of this cold front that we're going to be getting on the opening day of Illinois archery opener, which opens up in about a week. I don't know when this airs, but October 1st is our opener, which is 5 days.
Thursday.
Yep. So we took a tour around a field. On Wednesday, our beans got cut by the farmer. So he harvested on Wednesday. We took our mobile blind out there on Thursday. Garrett pulled it out. We bought a running gear that a blind's going to go on top of, that we're getting the deer acclimated to it as soon as we can without driving through the farmer's beans with a anhydrous wagon, basically, and ruining a big swath of them. So yesterday we pulled that out there for gun season, put it in position where we think we're going to have the biggest area of traffic, most buck activity during gun season, which for us this year will be, 3rd weekend in November. And then yesterday we took a tour around the perimeter of this field, which is a 260 acre field. So we drove around the whole thing and looked for any new mock scrapes or any new actual scrapes that we could find, and we found one. We repositioned the mobile on a stick and pick there, and we freshened a challenge scrape right next to it. So in the next few days, we're hoping to find what actually made that particular scrape. So that's kind of the moves that we're making currently. We're just trying to figure out, on this acreage, just because of how vast it is, how large it is. Like we talked about earlier, this acreage last year we counted, there was 9 different mature bucks, in our opinion, that worked the property. We know of 2 that lived. Some of them were roamers, just passed through deer. But we're trying to find those 3 different areas in which these deer are staying. We believe we know where one of them's staying, but we just need the temperature to drop a little bit more, push them on some more regularity for, being able to put ourselves in the position to kill them in daylight. So,
very good. Well, is there any other standout pieces from the image autopsy? I mean, I've watched, what do you have, 7 out right now, 6 or 7?
Yep, there's 7. Episode 7 just dropped about an hour ago.
Yeah, and I do think there's a lot of value in just being able to see a case study, because obviously no deer is the same, no 2 farms are the same, but there are a lot of common elements to every one of them. And everything is different, but cameras definitely, I assume, play a major, major role in every one of them.
Dude, we've podcasted ourselves about this. We think trail cameras are hands down one of the biggest modern advancements for the modern huntsman. I mean, if we didn't have trail cameras, yesterday we would have hung some stands, but if trail cameras were not a thing, our hunting tactics would be completely different. I mean, completely different. And the other thing is, too, I think it changes the way that we would harvest deer. I think one of the best things that trail cameras does for people, whether you hunt them and use them like how we do and crunch every bit of data we can get out of them, or if you just use them for inventory collection, the fact that you know what's out there is a big deal. Because if you were hunting a farm and you had no idea what was out there, you just scouted from the road, maybe you saw a couple bucks, maybe you didn't, but like the first nice, like we'll say like 140-inch 10-pointer, which is a very nice deer, comes out, you're probably going to shoot it. But it's only because you didn't know you had like 2 or 3 deer that were bigger than it, right? I just think that trail cameras are still, bar none, are the biggest asset to the modern huntsman right now, whether you use them right or not. I mean, I think that they're invaluable. We have, deer stands have come a long way, weaponry has come a long way, but still, I think trail cameras just take the cake by a landslide.
Yeah. Yep. I totally agree.
So, trail cameras in general, right? Those are, as your opinion,
The biggest tool.
Yeah, biggest technical advancement for hunting big deer. Now, from standard camera to cell camera, what's that next jump in your term? If you had to put a multiplier of 4 cell or your regular cameras are worth 1 cell camera, what's the multiplier on that?
I'd say triple. I'd say a cell cam's worth about 3 times as much. I mean, I'm so torn on the Pope and Young, Boone and Crockett crap that's going on right now and the topsy-turvy nature of that. I don't know how they're going to monitor that. I myself don't really give 2 shits about being in a book, so I'm not like a guy that's going to enter every deer or whatever, and I don't think any of the 4 of us are. In fact, I do not believe any of the Booners that we've killed. I think we've killed 5, and we've killed probably 30 Pope and Youngs, and none of them are entered.
Here's my thing. When we're going to do a Hunterversy on this, I cannot wait. So the Hunterversy will, spoiler alert, we'll give the Exodus Trail Cam Radio this. The Hunterversy is going to be, so Boone and Crockett and Pope and Young, for those of you who don't know, they've deemed that if you use a cellular camera to help aid in harvesting this, it's now not book worthy. So we think that crossbows have allowed 10-fold more entries than cellular cameras, and we're talking about like the honorability, the prestige, whatever you want to talk. We're diving all into it about the difference between using cell cameras and resorting to a crossbow. And there's no, both are fine and legal and dandy, right? But anyway, I think that cellular cameras add a huge convenience factor, but I do think that they do add a dose of lethality. But still, if you told me if I could have, you said 3 to 1. We'll use that analogy. If I could have 1 cell cam or if I could have 3 regular cameras, I'm taking 3 regular cameras every day. Hands down.
But for the intel, though, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about for the intel purposes of having it here and now. Like when we get a picture of that deer on Wednesday night when the cold front drops, and if we get an opportunity on Thursday and Friday, it's going to be because that camera was like, ping, here you go, he's here,
I
without
agree.
us having to check it. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying the convenience factor of knowing the instantaneous data is what's powerful. But I would also rather take 3 cameras just for the locations, number of deer you can find.
The 2 biggest things that I think cellular cameras do is, just like you said, instantaneous data. And even a little bigger for me is the non-pressurability, because more times than not we'll find that we put our cell cameras in very sensitive areas, and typically those sensitive areas are exactly where you need to be to kill a deer, a big smart buck like that. So I think they're very valuable. Both of them are, the instant data and the fact that you set it out and you forget it. I mean, the new cameras tell you their battery life, signal life, everything. Like the only time you need to go in there is to change the batteries, and you can even prevent.
Use a solar panel.
Yeah, you can.
If you're using a cell camera, not a solar panel, I think you're silly.
Yeah, I mean, you can prevent having to do that now. So, but yes, I don't know. I don't know if there's a 3 to 1. I don't know if there's truly a ratio, because we've killed a lot of big deer with trail camera help before cellular capabilities were even out.
I think the thing that I don't understand about that whole deal is that cellular trail camera technology has been out for 5 years. Why now are they taking the brink and pouncing on
Mass
that?
adoption, I would say. I mean, we've seen it, and if you look at, there's a lot more, every year there's more and more people buying their first cell camera. And I think as anyone gets one is not enough. They're going to buy a lot more of them. So
fair.
My take is just the mass adoption of that. And who knows? I mean,
My thing, though, with that is that even though you have a cell camera, you still have to analyze the data. Like, just because you have I mean, it's.
I could see with Boone and Crockett, and you can use firearm equipment. I could maybe see
even
that.
then, we talked about that. Okay, like let's go, especially in Illinois where we have shotguns and muzzleloaders. If you're a very good shot and you have your gun dialed in, you're talking about a 300-yard gun. That's at best. That's giving you
ball-in shot with
I know,
a shotgun.
but I'm giving you the best
Yeah.
thing, right?
That's crazy.
So it's not instantaneous. I would say that there's probably anywhere a 30-second to 60-second delay That's very good from when the camera takes a picture to when you get it on your phone. That's exceptional. Typically with us, with the cameras that we use, we're seeing more like 5 to 8 minute response.
We have 20-second transmission times, so that changes things.
Wow. So it does change things. It does change things. But I'm just saying, okay, the white-tailed deer, they're freaking incredible. Like you're in your deer stand, okay, and on the other side of the farm, you get a picture of a deer working a scrape. You get it within 20 seconds. Do you think you'll be able to get down, be mobile, and get over to him without that deer or any other deer blowing or busting you? I mean, that is very unlikely.
I think you could design a farm pretty easily, though, if you got it and he's at a destination food source. And, he got there at 4 o'clock. So, I can drive home from work. Get in my car.
Now that is very different. I think for baiting states, I think that's which we're going to talk about that, because like a bait state, that would be definitely what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. You got a feeder, you got a corn pile, you've got something along those lines, and now you could be sitting at home, ping, it's an hour till sunset, and Chachi McGee just showed up at the feeder, right? And so now you can go make a play on that. I get that. But then again, well, now you're splitting hairs, because baiting is legal in the Boone and Crockett Club. Like, you know what I mean? Which
what
it's
I think
antiquated.
Yeah, like your point you brought up about a destination food source. I could see a person legitimately, but then I have a hang up with what I'm about to say anyway. I could see a person with a destination food source, like a standard guy that owns like 40 or 80 acres with a big ass food plot in the back. Mm-hmm. He goes down his trail and he's like, ping, I got an image of a buck I want to kill. Number one, the question that we should ask ourselves
why
before
the hell
he's even doing, why isn't he hunting?
Yeah.
If you have cell cameras, if you have a food plot, like that's where Boone and Crockett to me doesn't add up. Yeah. It's because the people that are intense enough to buy a cell camera and to have food plots to make the whole hypothetical bullshit scenario that I'm even saying right now possible, they're going to be in the blind because they're going to know that deer is going to be there. A cell cam wouldn't aid in that harvest at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but
yeah. I'm going to go hunt and over then to on this sneak ridge up when I got 5 acres of standing beads and
it's January.
Yeah.
And let's not forget about the time of the year in which a deer is going to hit a quote-unquote destination food source. Mm-hmm. Most likely we're talking about late. Most likely deer have been shot at for months. Yeah. Plural. Most likely, there could be snow on the ground in Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, in the Midwest, anywhere. There could be snow on the ground. Leaves. Dude, I don't know about anybody else's deer, but how are you going to... It's hard enough to like spot and stalk like an antelope or a mule deer, let alone a whitetail that's been blasted at for months
with
straight.
30 other deer.
With 30 other eyes
40.
watching you.
No.
Yeah, I just don't think you could sneak up, and I think they're like, oh, I got a deer. I'm going to just go lean out.
Cancel culture, man.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
People being jealous. If you had a cell camera and you killed a big deer.
Yeah. That's a whole other episode in itself. Let's dive into, you guys talk about all these, breaking down what you're looking at in some of these trail camera photos or videos. What are some of the biggest pieces that you're looking at? I know you mentioned date, time, wind, but what are some of those other advancements? Are you just thinking of... I'll let you guys say it.
Can I bring up a tip before we get into that?
Yeah.
Tip. I know you asked a little bit earlier about a master class for trail camera users. One of my biggest tips for somebody that's just bought their first trail camera, cellular or not, please do not hang it perpendicular to a trail on the trail edge. You are going to get, if your trigger speed is low and a deer is trotting by it during the rut, that is going to be a blurry image. You're not going to be able to probably see its head.
You guys are not using the right cameras.
So
we just released a video saying, so how a PR sensor works, you actually want that. So
I like it when it's walking away or coming to. I got to be honest. When we're...
Hey everyone, Cameron with Texas Trail Cameras. I just wanted to add some context around why what Grant is saying here is not totally correct, and we don't recommend it. So we just released a video on the correct way to hang trail cameras on deer trails and the best way to monitor them. We also have a really good blog on the way PIR sensors work. I will link that in the description, and there will be a card up here for the video we just released. So the best way to hang trail cameras on trails is perpendicular movement. The trigger speed has nothing to do with motion blur. That's actually the shutter speed. So just wanted to make sure that was clear. Now let's get back into it.
The modern guy, I feel like has got, $1,000 trail camera, $800 trail camera budget, like they have, somebody that's intense about it, maybe running like 8 or 10 trail cameras, and all those advancements, those features like a PIR sensitivity camera that's shooting like a 0.01 trigger speed, like that's going to be a little bit of a step up in cost for an average Joe guy. Wouldn't you agree with that?
No.
You don't agree
Our
with that?
Trek,
God.
it's $100. You can buy that for $100 and some dollars. It's gonna work.
$100 and some.
Well, if you're a thrifty shopper, I'm not gonna tell how everyone can buy our cameras cheaper, but so $145 is what it retails for. Bulletproof. One of my favorite cameras. The Lift 2 is more feature rich, but that is a budget friendly camera in my opinion, and you still. The PIR sensor is just how
and you don't
it's
sacrifice
designed.
quality.
Exactly. Right? So, and a lot of that, like motion blur of a deer cruising through, there's a lot more that goes into that more. So anyways,
well,
I don't agree.
I like angling it down the trail and getting them going to and from.
I think
in
you
my
have
opinion.
a chance for more pictures or a longer video. But to answer the question, other than diving into it, I think there's two things that we do that are very important. The first one is, there's an age-old saying that if a picture is worth 1,000 words, well, then a video is worth 1,000. A video is worth 1,000 pictures. Mm-hmm. So we really run a lot of our cameras on video mode, just because you do collect a lot more data than just an image. Now with mobile cameras, that is a little bit harder to do because of data restrictions, depending on the plan and the company they use. But I think video is something that we definitely lean to, especially coming into the season. I bet that almost every camera that we checked yesterday, we turned to video mode.
Mm-hmm. How long are you setting? Are you setting it for 10 seconds or 30 seconds?
Minimum of 30 seconds.
Yes.
In some cases, 60 seconds is where it's applicable. Mm-hmm. But again, it just allows you to get so much more than just a picture. Even if you do like a 3-shot burst, the video is going to give you a lot of stuff to analyze. But diving into it, like we talked about, Grant literally has a chart spreadsheet that he records everything down on. So if there's a deer that we get a picture of, Grant goes to his book, flips it open, records the time that he was there, the temperature, and then the wind direction. And when you start looking at that, you'll pick up on key things that you can notice and pick up on. But the most important factor that I think you can have with a trail camera, and particularly a deer, is consistency. And I don't think it needs to be in a 9-day cycle. I don't think it has to be in 2 weeks in a row. But if you have a deer that's frequenting a camera, then you know that he's going to be pretty local. And until he stops, I think you have a very good reason to hunt close to wherever that camera is. And that's what I think the biggest thing that we see. Like even though we have pictures of, we'll say, Robert on a couple different cameras at the Heartbeat, if we have him on one place the most, like if we were going to go in there and try to kill him, we're going to hunt closest to that camera that we get him on the most. You know what I mean? So consistency of a particular deer, I think, is the most valuable thing that
before
you
go in
away.
to try to hunt.
Yes, before you try to crunch any other data. Just, are you getting this deer? Is it a one-trick pony, or do you have him multiple times? Mm-hmm. And then from there, you can start to dive into everything else.
And I think it's important to note too, when we're looking through trail cameras, we're taking everything with a grain of salt. Like, I know this is trail camera radio, but the reality is that sometime a deer could walk a different way that's not, the way that the camera is pointing. And we do our best as hunters. Every trail camera geek tries to get the most efficiency out of their camera, tries to catch that deer as many times as they can. But the reality is, and Garrett and I always seem to go back to this day, our best day of rut hunting, it was 2 years ago. We saw three of our 5-year-olds that day. We ended up seeing 45 deer total in a wood setting. We got 3 trail camera pictures that day because at that time the leaves have dropped, most of the underbrush is dead and gone. Deer can run through the woods wild. And so by our trail camera, that was a poor day of hunting. There was 3 pictures on that camera that day. And not a single shooter, but we had 3 shooters within 80 yards of us that day. And so we always take that with a grain of salt by knowing, like what Garrett just said, if we have a deer coming in every 3rd or 4th day, that's not like a discouraging thing to us. That means that he's local. That means that he could have those other couple days, just based on the wind direction, traveled through that food plot a different way. And maybe the 1 or 2 trail cameras that we had out there didn't catch him and he skirted it. But
what was that date when you had I mean, do you recall what day? November.
November.
So it was during our rutcation, 6th, 7th, 9th. Yeah,
I think it was the 9th.
Somewhere between the 4th and the 10th, guaranteed. Because that's
3 seasons ago. It was a big snowstorm in the early November in Illinois.
Okay.
I could probably find it if you're
8th or 9th.
Yeah, 8th or 9th. Yeah,
I remember that snowstorm.
Yep.
I was out as well.
Yep.
Okay. Interesting. So, yeah, we totally agree. I mean, I totally agree that your camera's not going to tell you anything, but it can tell you something.
Yeah.
And sometimes it telling you nothing is still telling you something as well.
Yep.
Just for a quick example, mine scooped up 120 acres. I have cameras plastered across that entire farm. Okay, I do. I'm trying to learn that
As fast as you can, yeah.
I want to get on the biggest deer in that neighborhood and kill it the first year. That's something I've struggled with. I cannot. It takes me 2 or 3 years. Still learning.
sure.
I have cameras all over, and I'm going through like, why do I have? I don't have any bucks. I don't have anything. I set a mock scrape in this really solid pinch point, and the issue of it was so stagnant all summer, and I still had it there, but there was doe family group all around it, and mind you, I've checked 8 or 9 cameras already. I'm like, what the hell? Getting frustrated.
Yep.
And then I went and checked that mock scrape. Mind you, like I have had no, I put it up in the summer. It was community licking. Like it's like, when is this gonna happen? And then like within the last 6 days, like 5 different bucks showed up.
Hell yeah.
Yep.
But that wasn't like everywhere around is like why are there no bucks here? Like there has to be, and none of those are deer that I'm necessarily like super fired up to hunt right now. But it's just
now
sticking to it and knowing that plan.
Yes.
And learning.
Yes. And now that you have those deer in that scrape, it's gonna go fire.
Yeah.
Because now you have natural scent, constant reactivation, and eventually Mr. Big will come by.
Absolutely. But that's where, you can get discouraged pretty quickly to that point of like, what? Like, so yeah. Just adjust, I would say, as well. I mean, are you guys moving your cameras around quite a bit? Like, you guys just went and checked cameras yesterday. Did you guys shift some around based on summer to now October? I mean, so what does that shift look like if someone hasn't gone out from this past summer to go and check those? What are you guys shifting your cameras to here in October?
Man, there's so many things that changed from summer to now.
You want to talk about the scrapes that we hung over, and then I'll talk about the trench or our new stand that we found the scrape that we found last shed season across the creek.
Well, I'm just talking about, I want to answer the question first, about changing from summer patterns to like now. I think food sources are drastically different in the summer months from now. And then you have obviously daylight changes, you have temperamental changes, deer have shed their velvet. Like the phenology of the deer has changed, the life cycle of the deer has changed. You need to adapt to that. And Grant's going to talk about with the scrapes and so on and so forth. But topographic changes as cornfields are coming out, as bean fields are coming out, yields many more opportunities for you to hang your cameras in places that you hadn't before. So for us, like we had ours a lot on like green bean fields. We had a couple like little early cessational like green plots of clover or rye. And now that fall is officially knocking at the door, you have to move those. You can't suspect those cameras that did really well in the summer to probably do just as good in the fall. So 2 big things. First off, we moved our cameras to places now that we're going to hunt, because typically in the summer months, we have found that the cameras that do well in the summer are not areas that we hunt in the fall. So now we're moving our cameras to give us data to where it's going to yield us an opportunity to kill a deer, not just to get a picture of them, right? So we moved these cameras yesterday, and literally we're putting them in the ground over a scrape or making a scrape or over a trail. And as we're doing this, we're saying hypothetically, that's the tree. Like we're planning ahead, because if this camera does fire off right and work well, like that's where we're going to sit to kill for the deer that we get on this camera. And then secondly is, like I said, is just the opportunity to put cameras out where you weren't before. When the corn is up, you're really limited, especially if your farm is loaded with corn or even beans, just because you can't get around the edge of it. But now that stuff, the crops are coming out, it yields hunters big time opportunities to move cameras, not just to field edges, but in other places of the farm that were limited with access. So Grant, I'll let you go on.
So going off corn, last year this heartbeat farm that we call it was corn, and so we did our best to take a mower in there and we mowed around the perimeter and connected a path between 3 different fingers, and we noticed that the buck traffic immediately started picking up just because of the ease of them being able to travel it at night. We're not talking like hardly any daytime walkers or anything with their velvet on, but like Garrett said, once that corn comes out and deer are free to roam through it and get to those separate fingers quicker and easier, then those cameras need to be moved. We're basically, when we hang them up in the summer, we're taking inventory, who made it, based on deer we didn't find sheds of, but deer we knew made it through gun season. So if a deer makes it through for us, we would consider that to be, after the muzzleloader weekend in Illinois, which is the first or second weekend in Illinois. If a deer makes it through that, we tack it up as he lived, because it's just hard. It's hard if you do not have late season food to kill a mature buck with a bow at that time of the year. So at this time of the year, we're moving them around based on ag, what's available, what's still in, what is not available, what is cut, and then we're also moving them around based upon the time of the year in which we know that certain elements are going to be hot for us. So one of our stands that we killed Garrett's buck out of last year, we call it the trench. It's a very big valley. Wind gets kind of squirrely in there. We can only hunt it on 1 or 2 different winds, but it is a rut funnel. And so knowing that was littered with a scrape line last year, right in the cut of this valley, it's like a 50-foot elevation change from top to bottom. It's about 30 acres total, but there is just a hellacious scrape line, scrapes and rubs all through the bottom of there. So we're taking those cameras and we are moving them into places, where we can kill those deer. So spots that we got our deer in velvet, etc., are not the places that our cameras stay. They're being moved now to near our stand locations. If we know about a tree that's like, okay, this is a historically good rut funnel, like everybody's got their stand that they trust, like during the rut, like I'm going here at least a few days, no matter what, just because I know that the traffic is going to be hot through here and my opportunity rate is going to be the best in here. But we're moving our cameras constantly based upon like the most recent information that we gather throughout the year. Most of what we're doing right now is keying in on scrapes and moving those cameras over scrapes and figuring out what deer made it. And like Garrett said, yesterday we moved one over an active and thought, okay, we're going to be able to hang up in that oak tree. We'll put it right above that bush where we'll have to do minimal shooting lane cutting. We'll hike up there. We'll sit at about 13 or 14 feet right above there so we can shoot him as he's coming along the field edge. So basically all the things we do, it's kind of like a scientific approach, I would say. It's saying, here's our hypothesis. A deer's coming in here. This is what we think. Okay, that's not true. Rehypothesize, rework it. And we're constantly doing things like that and learning and adapting and saying, okay, if X, then Y. Okay, Y didn't happen. Now we start with a new X. So
you teach math?
Maybe.
No, where are we at on time here?
We're good. We can keep ripping. If, 105.
105.
Hour 5.
That's a marathon. Usually we're at 40.
Yeah, I know.
No, I think, I mean, there's so much that can go into that, and I feel being adaptable obviously is key, and then knowing if there's even a realistic chance of going in to kill that deer. I know there's people that like, I didn't think I'd see him, and I went and killed him.
Yep.
And that's cool. That's great. But I think hunting with precision, especially with people that have obligations, you have to.
Well, even not obligations. I mean, every year when you start a hunting season, I think this is called the 3-goal rule, something that I learned in a management class. It was really cool, actually. But the speaker he's talking about, he's like, before you do anything, like whether it's a task, if you're making a sales call, if you're going to go teach a seminar, hunting, right? Like your archery season or your 2020 season comes up, he's like, set 3 goals. He's like, make one obtainable, make one very impossible, and set one in the middle. So I think if you're a hunter, okay, what's your goal? Well, I want to kill a deer. I mean, that's very obtainable. I want to kill deer X or a deer this big. That's very hard. And then, I want to have an opportunity at a 4-year-old. Like if you spread those goals out, it's you have one that's obtainable, one that's very difficult, and one that's realistic. And when you do that, I think with trail cameras, I mean, you'll be able to set your bar according to what you use. And like you said, with precision, it just takes a lot of analyzation and dedication, and you can make it work. So
without going to that class, I have very similar goals. I want to shoot a net booner. This year, very, very difficult. Or a 5-year-old 150-inch deer. I mean,
the
other one, I didn't set the low goal, but I think there's truth to that though, and you have to be adaptable too. Because if I only wanted to kill a net booner, I don't know of a net booner right now that I can kill right now. Right. So
I just think the biggest thing, we've seen it, and there's a lot of people that do it, but the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. If you have your camera out and you're not getting what you want, then move it, man. What's the worst case? You always take it back, but you should definitely continue to be changing and adapting as the season progresses, as your farm changes, everything. There's a ton of different things we could talk about, but
don't be afraid to fail and set realistic goals. I think realistic being key. Like I feel like a lot of people have this in their head that Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, if they come to that one of those states, that booners are going to be lurking behind every tree. I tell you what, we let a lot of deer go on that farm that are managed well, and we've only ever grown one or two, and that's with food and an extreme amount of comfort in a really genetically good area. Like, it takes something special to. So, I feel like people get a little disgruntled on social media and stuff like that because everybody's killing, 160, 170, 180 inch deer. It feels that way, but everybody isn't. And people get down about a nice, like, 130, 140 inch deer. Well, if he's 4 and you want to shoot him, then shoot him if that fits into your goal. Like this year on the Heartbeat Farm, like we said, we're being realistic. Like, we know that we're not going to be able to protect all of these deer through a gun season. We do not have the ability to put food on there and manage it. We are permission hunting it, and so that particular spot, I mean, we have to be realistic about our ceiling. Like, if there's a booner, yeah, maybe we make a play on it, but I don't care. We're not chasing inches. We're chasing a deer that makes us happy. And if there's a 4-year-old that fits that bill on that farm, realistically, we were going to put an arrow or a bullet through him and not feel bad about it.
Running.
Yeah.
Hence the name. That makes sense. That lines up with the name. So, well, I think we have a lot of things here planned for the day. So we certainly appreciate you guys sitting down with us here Sunday morning. I know it's the weekend, and certainly appreciate it. And then so there's about 7 episodes from this series out right now. And if you're listening to this, I do suggest to check it out because I think there's a lot of good lessons to be known from these case studies, and it may spark a different thought for you, like the 9-day pattern. Maybe you start going back and looking at some of your photos. It could be the difference of killing a deer you really want to or not. So those are, where can they find these?
So on our YouTube channel, which is Last Breath TV, it's called the Image Autopsy series. We have a playlist on YouTube that's got 7 in it. So by the time this airs, it'll be probably 8 or 9 in there. Mm-hmm. And I think that you guys are going to really enjoy them. There's some that are very simple lessons that we learned, like next week's episode, and there are some lessons like Matt's that are very like Whitetail Ninja-esque and diving in deep. So I would check that out. And we have a lot of really good buck hunts over there too: archery, muzzleloader, mule deer, antelope, bear, everything like that. A little bit of noodling. So you guys can check it all out on our YouTube. But we really appreciate you listening.
All right, appreciate it. And until next time, see you guys.